Hi everyone, welcome back to Lifting the Lamp. And today I'm going to be doing a video which I've been building up to for quite some months now. This is my account of when I completed the full 49-day Gebofal Ritual of Enochian magic in 2014-15. Now, the topic I'm discussing today is a very niche topic, so if you haven't heard of the Gebofal Ritual, you don't know what it is, and you haven't heard of Enochian magic, I would strongly encourage you to go watch the videos I've done so far on Enochian magic for some vital background, and I will link those videos in the description below. But now for today's video. In brief, what is the Gebofal Ritual? The Gebofal Ritual comes down to us as one of the most important rituals that is found in the Enochian system of magic. The Enochian system of magic was received in Elizabethan times by John Dee and Edward Kelly through their scrying sessions using a crystal ball to communicate with angelic beings. They gave them this system of magic to do various things and work with the angels in various ways. And one of the parts of the system was the Gebofal Ritual. The Gebofal Ritual is a 49-day long ritual, and on each of the 49 days there is a different call or invocation that the magician reads to open one of 49 gates. And then the purpose of opening the gate is to be able to send your consciousness through the method of scrying or divination into the level of the heavens that is opened by that call. So there are 49 different levels to the cosmos that the magician can scry as a result of opening the gate by reading the call. During the scrying session, they will perceive angels and receive visions and communications from them. And when the angels were communicating the Gebofal Ritual to Dee and Kelly, they definitely made out like this is a very important ritual that can have profound effects on the human race in terms of the kind of spiritual knowledge that can be received by the magician undertaking this ritual. The angels spoke to Dee and Kelly of the tables of Loga that are from heaven, and the knowledge of which is accessed by the Gebofal Ritual. The angels said of that knowledge, "Out of this shall be restored the holy books, which have perished even from the beginning, and from the first that lived. And herein shall be deciphered perfect truth from imperfect falsehood, true religion from false and damnable errors, with all arts, which are proper to the use of man, the first and sanctified perfection, which when it hath spread a while, then cometh the end." So this is quite a big claim that's being made by the angels contacted by Dee and Kelly, that the knowledge that they would communicate through the working of the Gebofal Ritual was so significant that it restored the spiritual knowledge given to humanity, which has been lost since the times of Adam and the antediluvian world, and that the restoration of that knowledge would restore humanity spiritually and is also linked to the end times. And it appears that what the angels intended was that eventually some of the knowledge that would be received during this Gebofal operation would be used to gather in a faithful remnant, a spiritual elect who could turn to a true, authentic spirituality at a time when the world was ending and in preparation for the arrival of the kingdom of God in some way. So needless to say, the kind of sublime knowledge that can be communicated from the angels to a human being during the Gebofal Ritual is quite profound and of a very high quality, spiritually speaking. As a young man exploring different esoteric topics, I really gravitated towards Enochian magic. It was something that really attracted me, and I was kind of known as the Enochian guy among my spiritual friends at the time. I had some early successes with Enochian magic when I was younger, and I wanted more. I was also a young and ambitious magician, you know, probably a bit too dark and edgy for my own good, but I wanted to push myself, and so I set out to learn more about this Gebofal ritual and eventually performing it. I spent some years researching the topic and finally reconstructing the ritual as much as I could. Aaron Leach's work was a big help in this regard. However, I didn't stick to the D-purist school of how the ritual should look. I had all of the key components, but I did introduce some hermetic symbolism over the top of that, and that is reflected in the visions that I received. But this didn't affect the result, except in that it added an extra layer of symbolism to the visions that I received. But I found that, for example, the 18 watchtower calls, there was much elemental symbolism, but I still got symbolism which matched very clearly and very closely with the wording of each call, each one of those calls that's associated with the watchtowers. Similarly, there's a bit of debate about the order, whether the watchtower calls should be before or after the calls of the ethers, whether this sequence should be from the bottom up or from the top down. I think all of that depends again on whether you're going with the kind of original initial symbolism that was probably intended for the 49 calls, which we're still not 100% sure about even today, or whether you introduce the extra hermetic symbolism in there. A lot of Judaic kind of ascent type of magic or mysticism had a top-down descent through the different layers of the heavens. The more hermetic kind of methods had a more bottom-up ascent type of approach, but the outcome was the same in each case. Just depended on which tradition did things which way. So I constructed the Gebofal ritual pretty close to what Leach recommends, with a little bit of influence from the Golden Dawn as well. But there was one crucial part that was missing, and that was the 49th call, because 48 calls had been given by the angels, but the 49th was never revealed. Without that, it would not be possible to complete the Gebofal ritual. So I reproduced the scrying sessions that Dee and Kelly used to get the original 48 to receive the 49th call, and that is one of the links that is in the description of this video below. So watch that if you want the full story of how I found the missing piece of the puzzle of this working. So I put together all the components of this ritual, and then the final thing that went into the planning stage was the timing. Now this is where things took a bit of an unexpected turn. When I first learnt about the Gebofal ritual, it was about 2012 at the very latest. I found out about it through the work of Donald Tyson and another e-book called The Key to the Abyss, I believe, talking about the work of Jack Parsons, magically speaking, and linking that to some Enochian kind of material. And so I learnt about the Gebofal ritual, but it was called the Enochian Apocalypse working by those authors because of its association with the times of the apocalypse. So when I first heard about the Gebofal ritual, or the Enochian Apocalypse working, I decided this is something I have to do much later down the track, years down the track. And I set a time for doing the ritual around 2020. However, circumstances would soon arise, which would see me doing it much sooner. Circumstances which were beyond my ability to plan, but nevertheless influenced me to this earlier date. So the first thing that happened was in early 2014, I was in my local bookshop, as I often was, and when I had some free time, browsing the occult section. And I discovered book by Aaron Leach, The Essential Enochian Grimoire. And being very interested in Enochian magic, as I already was, and seeing how well researched the book was and how many gaps in my knowledge it was able to fill, I decided to purchase the book. And one of the things that Leach discusses in this book is the Gebofal Ritual, and I felt newly inspired to investigate this ritual again, reading Leach's work, and I had such enthusiasm that I wanted to try the ritual out as soon as I could, rather than waiting another 6 years to do so. The other thing which influenced me to do the Gebofal Ritual earlier was around that time, early 2014 or mid 2014, I was approaching the end of another magical working that I'd been engaged in, which it'd be too hard for me to explain here, but suffice to say, it was something I had been doing to try and reach my spiritual potential, the next stage in my spiritual potential. Now, when I first started that particular working, I didn't know how to conclude it, so I conducted a divination session, and in that divination session I received the message that I need to appear before the sanctuary to be accepted, and that would be the end of this other magical working I was engaged in. Now, I interpreted the sanctuary in terms of the cloud upon the sanctuary, the domain of the secret chiefs, which lies above the abyss in terms of the Kabbalistic tree of life. And there was only one method I knew at the time that would allow me to engage in vision work with beings from that level of the heavens, and that was Enochian magic. Specifically working with the 30 ethers, some of which are above the abyss. So I would have to work with all the ethers anyway, so I decided that I would just do the full 49-day Gebofal ritual in the process. The other significant thing that was happening at this time was the Blood Moon Tetrad. Some of you might remember, but there was a significant sequence of blood moons in the years 2014 and 2015, whereby in an event that has only happened a few times in the last 2,000 years, there were 4 consecutive full lunar eclipses, and each one of these lunar eclipses, each one of these 4 blood moons fell on one of the holy days of the Jewish calendar. And there was also a solar eclipse in the middle of the Tetrad. Now, 2 popular evangelists at the time, John Hagee and Mark Blitz, saw this Blood Moon Tetrad and took it as a sign that the end was coming. Hagee and Blitz based their theory off of a prophecy that was given in the book of Joel and was repeated by the Apostle Peter again in the book of Acts, with Peter giving that prophecy again on the day of Pentecost, another holy day in its own right. And the prophecy given by Joel was this: "And I will show wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and terrible day of the Lord comes." A sequence of solar and lunar eclipses fits both descriptions of the moon turning to blood and the sun turning black. And in the theory, the connection with Pentecost seemed to connect these celestial events with particular holy days as a sign being given by God. The fact that in Hagee's view, the last few tetrads that have happened like this coincided with important times in the history of Israel and the Jewish people, and God fulfilling the promises that he made in the Bible. And of course, there's always an assumption that we are living very close to the end among Christian circles, and so came this view that the Blood Moon Tetrad was a sign that the end times were about to begin, and that the Tetrad sequence would mark the beginning of the end times. So needless to say, this cultural expectation of the end times beginning fit very nicely with what was expected of the time in which the Gebofal Ritual needs to be completed. So it was something of a factor in me deciding to begin when I did, although it doesn't seem to have been significant enough a factor for me to have made a note of it in any of my journals. It was only years later that I remembered the Tetrad had happened at that time. So much more significant in me making my decision to begin the Gebofal Ritual when I did was finding Leech's book, which was published in March of 2014, and also trying to find a way to appear before the sanctuary. And I think that without knowing about the Blood Moon Tetrad, there possibly would have been things from the outside compelling me to do the working at that time anyway. And I've thought about this since, and it's quite spooky. It's like I was being drawn like a horse to water to complete the working when I did, and that I was doing this working, I thought, by my own agency, but perhaps I was going by the timetable of something greater than myself for its own plans. And now I had everything that I needed to begin the Gebofal Ritual. And I did complete it. I completed all 49 days, and the results were incredible. But if I go into that now, this is going to be a very long video. I've probably given you enough to digest already. So I'm going to do a part 2 where I talk more about the results, both externally and internally, of me completing the 49-day Gebofal Ritual. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, thanks for listening. Like and subscribe. Please also subscribe to my Odyssey account. If you have any comments, leave them down below. And I'll see you next time for the installment of part 2.